news coverage lately about human trafficking, but there's a whole other side of human trafficking that we're going to learn about tonight, as well as some information on the recent events. For me, I started to learn about human trafficking through Place of Hope about 1.5 years ago. It didn't really sink in how big the problem really was. My wife and I have been involved with Place of Hope for about 10 years, working with them, helping them expand and recruit foster families here in Indian River County. And about 2 years ago, they became very involved in becoming one of the lead agencies on human trafficking on the east coast of Florida. A few things that caught my eye that I had no idea about was that 50% of the people trafficked in Florida are U.S. citizens. To me, that was just a stunning fact that I had no idea that the number would be that high. And one of the other statistics that really got my attention was about 25% of the people trafficked are minors under the age of 18. Also, at that time, I wasn't aware that Florida was ranked number 3 in the U.S. in human trafficking cases. A few housekeeping items. If you have a cell phone, put it on silent. We're going to have a question and answer session after each of the presenters has presented their segment that we have here tonight. Just so that everybody can hear the question, you can either go to either side of the room at the 2 podiums that are there, and if you would like to receive additional information or be put on a Place of Hope has a newsletter and some other information that goes out, you can leave your name and an email address if you'd like to have more information. And those 2 clipboards are on either side of the room here. And so let me, also one of our speakers has another appointment during the same time tonight, Major Eric Flowers. You'll see him leave here a little bit earlier before the program's over. But let me introduce all our speakers that we have with us here tonight. Covering Human Trafficking 101, the head of Human Trafficking Education and Prevention with Place of Hope is Laura Cusack. Then we have from Indian River County Sheriff's Office, Major Eric Flowers and Sergeant Ross Partee. From the 19th Judicial Circuit, Assistant State Attorney Jeff Hendricks. And from the Department of Homeland Security, Investigations Resident Agent Daniel Ruiz. And speaking on actionable steps against human trafficking, we have Jamie Bond from Place of Hope. And with that, we will start out with Laura Cusack on Human Trafficking 101.
All right, well, thank you so much to everyone who came and has showing an interest in this topic. As you know, it's a very timely time to be talking about this. So we'll kind of get into what trafficking is, what it looks like, and kind of the different types that we see in the state of Florida so that you guys have a good kind of ground understanding of this as we move forward. So to get started, looking at how the statutes define human trafficking, we're looking at people that are being recruited, maybe they're being harbored, so maybe they're kept at a certain job site or in somebody's home, being transported maybe to or from certain jobs, and then also just being bought and sold for labor, for sex, for different activities that we'll define a little further here. But essentially what we're seeing with both types of trafficking, sex trafficking and labor trafficking, is a use of force, fraud, and coercion. And I'll go into a little bit more of what each of those are in a minute, but we'll keep going forward here. We're talking about basically a business model for these traffickers, that they're in this to make money. And we see groups that maybe previously would have bought and sold drugs or weapons to make their money, moving towards selling people because it's way more profitable in some ways. So if you think about a drug, if I'm a drug dealer and I'm selling this drug, every time I sell it, I have to replenish my supply. And in that process of replenishing it, not only do I have to reinvest more money, there's also more risk. I could get caught, I could get killed, something could happen. Whereas if I have a person, I'm able to sell that person multiple times, not have to ever replace them or get, reinvest in another way and still make a lot of money off these people 10, 20 times a day, a night. And so we see some groups moving towards sex trafficking in particular because they can make a lot more money off of that. On this next slide here, we'll talk a little bit about how many people we're talking about on this planet at any given time that are believed to be trafficked. And you'll see here on the following slide here that there's 20 to 40 million people estimated to be entrapped in human trafficking. And it's a range, 20 to 40 million, because we honestly don't fully know how many. Many times a victim of human trafficking will not recognize that they're a victim. They feel like maybe this is this is the agreement, this is how I get my drugs, this is how I pay my rent, or maybe they've come from such an abusive background that being trafficked doesn't feel much different than the trauma and the abuse they've experienced growing up their whole life. So sometimes they won't necessarily flag law enforcement down and say, I need help. Sometimes it's up to us to be the eyes and ears to recognize that this may be a trafficking case. We also know that boys and men are being trafficked. There's not a lot known about it because many times the male victims do not self-report. They're fearful to come forward. Perhaps they're embarrassed what people may think of them. If I'm a 17-year-old male, it might be really embarrassing for me to come forward and say, hey, I'm being sex trafficked. I may be afraid that people won't believe me, or they may say, oh, well, you were a guy. You should have just enjoyed that. And so we see males not necessarily always reporting, and so we know that they're a part of that number. It's just a question of how many are out there. A lot of it's unknown. We'll keep going here. Florida, as I'm sure you've heard now through all the news stories that have come out, we are ranked number 3 in the country based on calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So you can see here on this map where we're sitting in South Florida, as well as other areas like kind of the Orlando area, Tampa. They're all kind of hot spots for human trafficking. So there's no denying that this is happening in our community, in our state. We're one of the fastest growing states for this, so it's only a matter of time before we might catch up to the other leading states. If someone is over the age of 18, it can be very challenging to prove that they're a victim of human trafficking because we have to show that there's some kind of force or fraud or coercion taking place. If I'm a 21-year-old young lady stripping at a club and saying that I do it because I love my boyfriend and this is how we pay rent, how will anyone be able to prove that I'm being trafficked if I'm not willing to cooperate with law enforcement? And because of the trauma bonding, because of the fear and manipulation, sometimes these victims are not willing to cooperate. So it's sometimes hard to kind of find the trafficker and kind of get enough evidence to make it a trafficking case. There was a time where minors would be arrested for this, or held accountable as a child prostitute. Thankfully, the laws have changed now to say that if you're under the age of 18, you cannot consent to this. It doesn't matter if you're 16, you say you want to do this, you're considered a victim. And so all we have to show is that you're under the age of 18 and there's some kind of commercial sexual act being exchanged for something of commercial value. So it's not always a cash exchange. It could simply be that I'm doing these activities because my boyfriend's going to buy me this new cell phone that has value. So it's something of commercial value being exchanged for some kind of sex act makes it a minor a victim of human trafficking. So when you think about that, there's a lot of things that can start to fall under the umbrella of human trafficking. Now, many times I've worked with young people under the age of 18 who do not recognize that they're victims. They think this is how I get my drugs. I ran away from the treatment facility. I had sex with this guy. He gave me the drugs I wanted. That was a normal exchange for me. They're not recognizing how sometimes they can be victims as well. Sometimes traffickers will brand their victims with tattoos that kind of serve a couple different purposes. One is it lets other traffickers know that this person is already claimed, that this property is already marked by that trafficker. But it's also very dehumanizing because even if we recover this victim and we've got them in a great program, they're getting services, they're in a safe place, every day they have to still get up and look in the mirror and see that marking, see that branding on their body. And so think about how powerful that can be psychologically, that even though you're out of that situation, you're still reminded every day because of this marking that was forced on your body. This next one was out of a case up north, and this trafficker's name was Cowboy. And you can see that this is a very long and large branding mark, and it almost reads like scripture. I'll just read a part of it. It says, "Following, understanding, and accepting the fruitful teaching, till death I live for he, thou he lives in me, anywhere I go, he be and forever lives." So anywhere, we may say, all right, we've got you, you're safe, you're good, and they're thinking, it literally says on my body, wherever I go, my trafficker is a part of me. It's very powerful. We also see labor trafficking. So these are the different industries we see, the top industries that we see labor trafficking in the state of Florida. Domestic servitude, individuals that are being forced to work and live in private homes. Maybe they're cooking, maybe they're the nanny. Chances are they came here thinking they would not allowed to leave the house. They might have been told they'd have a room and a bed, and it turns out they don't. Maybe they get one meal a day. If you think about, look at all these different industries, working in a private home, working out in the fields, working in the back of a restaurant or a hotel, very isolated places where their interaction with the public is very limited. So we see a lot of sex trafficking cases, not always a lot of labor trafficking cases, because the workers are so controlled, so hidden, that sometimes it's hard to identify that they're even there. Force, fraud, and coercion. These are the different tactics a trafficker will use to control and manipulate a victim. So when we talk about force, we're talking about more of the physical side, the violence, threatening, beating someone if they don't go have sex with these 5 guys, or raping them as a punishment. For fraud, we see this kind of lies and deception. So maybe I live in another country, I was promised this dream job in America, I come here and find out the circumstances are totally not what I signed up for. But we also see fraud with sex trafficking. We see young girls in the United States who are responding to ads to become models. And they genuinely think that this person that's talking to them and offering to help them get their headshots taken is going to help them kind of jumpstart their career. We see with labor trafficking primarily foreign nationals, but with sex trafficking, a lot of these victims are our own United States citizens, and often it starts with our young teenagers. But coercion is I think one of the most powerful ones out of the 3. And a trafficker will use all kind of different types of them, but coercion is really that trauma bonding. That's that manipulation. If you kidnap me and throw me in a room, chances are when that door's unlocked, I'm probably gonna run because I have no connection to you, no loyalty. I might try to break free. But if you take the time to get to know me and invest in me, be that listening ear, be that support, be there when nobody else was, chances are I could walk around in the community, I could drive my own car, I could have my own phone, but I'm probably not going to talk or report anything because I have this bond with you. And there's a story I'll share real quickly about that we, with a detective up in the center of the state that we work with. And there was a young girl who ran away from home and was sitting at a McDonald's. And she's there with her bags. And this guy comes up to her and says, "Hey, can I buy you McDonald's, a burger?" And she says, No, I'm fine. And he says, "Okay, well, here's my card and my information. If you ever need anything, just give me a call." And he leaves. He comes back a couple hours later and notices that she's still there. So clearly she's got no one waiting for her, no one to meet up with, no plan here, no plan of action. Again, he offers to buy her this burger. And she says, No, I'm good. So sometime later, it's a couple of days, a week later, she's still on the streets. She runs into some trouble, and who do you think she called? That guy. And he ended up being a trafficker. Now, he could have kidnapped her, he could have made a move on her, he could have done something inappropriate, but he didn't, because he knew if I just plant that seed, I can sit back and wait, and she'll come to me. How much more powerful is that for her to come to me? Because now, throughout the rest of our relationships, I can abuse her, I can exploit her, but I can always say, yeah, but you came to me. I helped you out. I was the one that was there for you no matter what. And so that kind of starts to become the coercion that's used to manipulate and keep a lot of these victims in a trafficking situation. Traffickers can be anyone, just like the victims can be anyone. The buyers can be anyone. We see men that are traffickers. We see women. We see other kids that are sitting in school with our kids that are learning kind of the weaknesses, which kid is parents going through divorce, which girl has low self-esteem, and they're able to pass that information back to a trafficker who now knows, oh, I'll friend request this person. I'll message this young person. So it's not just one type of person that can be a trafficker. We see lots of different ones. Usually it's someone that either knew the victim or took the time to get the victim and build that trust. When we talk and we do trainings and groups with a lot of the youth in our communities, we ask them what they think a pimp looks like. This is one of the drawings from one of the groups that I've done with youth, and they literally drew this guy who's got a purple collar, a velvet robe, a top hat with a feather in it, and they said a trafficker would be an old man trying to be cool. So if this is who our kids are thinking a trafficker is, and there's a few out there, but not many, they're gonna miss that attractive young man who's gonna try to befriend them or Facebook them or buy them lunch at the mall. So we have to really get that education out there to let them know kind of that a trafficker can look like, different types of people. What the traffickers are looking for is some kind of vulnerability, and we all have things throughout our life that we wanted, that we needed, we desired, that we couldn't get or were hard to get. And so these traffickers are very, very skilled at identifying and determining what each person's vulnerability is. So it doesn't matter if you come from, an impoverished community, a well-off community, you could still feel like you're not being heard in your own two-parent gated community household. It doesn't matter if you don't have a substance use problem, they'll probably give you one because it creates dependency. So now you kind of rely on them to feed your addiction. Of course, different challenges with self-esteem, which cuts across and affects all of our kids. If someone comes up and is willing to kind of feed into their ear and compliment them, make them feel good about themselves, it kind of starts to form that relationship. But at the end of the day, if people don't think this could happen to their child and they don't educate their child about about this issue, that also makes our kids vulnerable. If our kids don't know what it is, they don't know how to talk about it or to let you know what's happening, they won't recognize when it might be happening to them. With trafficking, we don't really see people most of the time not just being kidnapped and thrown into it. It's something that's happening over time. That's a process. It's a relationship that's forming. So that means there's lots of points where we can possibly be picking up on and seeing red flags and intervene to help our kids. And is there anything else? Okay, last one. So, and again, talking about self-esteem and relationships with our young people, this is, again, from a group that we do with the girls, where we ask them to list what they think is a healthy and unhealthy relationship. And then each girl picks one relationship in their life, and they plot it on the scale, and we talk about why they put it there. And this varies with every group, but recently I've been doing a group with girls that are in a juvenile detention center, and they honestly did not know what to put under a healthy relationship. They maybe had 3 things, and half of those things are things that you and I would have said, no, that's unhealthy, put it on the other side. So if they don't know how to recognize what's a healthy relationship, if they've never seen it, imagine what a great candidate they are for a trafficker to come along and exploit them. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. Put it in your phone, have it on you, because it's a great resource. It's who you call if you think that maybe someone's being trafficked. It's a national number. It's 24/7, and it's also the same number that victims can call. So if a young victim gets this number in Florida, ends up in Texas, they can call the same number. When these calls come in, they do get sent back down to local law enforcement in the area who know how to handle these cases and are very familiar with working trafficking cases. So it's a great number to have and to pass around to your friends. And I think that's it. All right, and that's it.
Great, thank you very much, Laura. Next, we're going to go down to Major Eric Flowers and Sergeant Ross Partee.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And I just want to say again, I've said it to you, thank you for bringing this to our community, making this happen tonight. It's an important topic. It's terrible that it had to take a major event in our community and in local communities for folks to realize that this is happening here in Indian River County. Sergeant Partee is here to talk to you. He worked his first human trafficking case in 2014. He became the head of the law enforcement portion of the Treasure Coast, the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Treasure Coast and Okeechobee, I have to get the title right, in 2015. And I will tell you that, as Laura mentioned, no 2 human trafficking cases look the same. So everyone is aware right now of our particular case with these particular spas, these massage parlors, as it were, in our county. And the one thing we don't want people to do is say, well, that's what it looks like. That's what human trafficking looks like, and become desensitized to it. Because the reality is, there's ladies in the room, maybe you go to a nail salon. Maybe it's happening there. Maybe you go to a restaurant and it's happening there. If you stayed in a hotel, you might not know it, but it's probably happening inside that hotel. So it's not just these sex cases that's making national news right now that we need to think about. There's so many varieties of human trafficking. It exists in so many ways. And it's not just people who are from outside of the United States. I mean, I know Laura mentioned that, but the reality is there are lost children, there are lost kids, there are lost adults in our society. And these folks get caught up because there's someone who makes them feel like they'll take care of them. And it can happen in an instant to someone that you know, someone that you love, and anybody, just as that story that she gave. So I'm very proud that we're having this as a community event, but I will tell you that we at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office have known that this is here and known that this has been happening, and we've said we've got to do something about this, which is why Sergeant Partee has been participating for some time now. We've done some things at the Sheriff's Office to try and bring awareness to this, but this is really spectacular to have it at a community level. So again, thank you, Commissioner. On behalf of the Sheriff's Office, thank you for coming out to learn about this. I hope you continue and don't just stop tonight. I hope you continue to research about this and find out more because it happens in so many different ways. There's a variety of organizations that are working on this, and whether it's you volunteer your time, maybe you have the ability to volunteer some money, whatever it is, but we need help combating this, and it's going to take a community to make change in this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Sergeant Partee, and as the Commissioner said, thank you for having me tonight. I can't stay, but I'm sure we'll get you a lot of good information tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Major Flowers. As he said, I'm Sergeant Ross Partee. I'm currently the supervisor for the South County Schools and the School Resource Unit at the Sheriff's Office. Prior to that, I was a detective for just under 6 years, and a part of what I investigated was human trafficking cases. I became passionate about human trafficking when I was in the police academy, and I saw a video called Fields of Mudan. It's a very sad video. We're not going to watch it tonight, but if you have a chance to, you can look it up on YouTube. Once I saw that video, I became very interested in how I could help and also catching the bad guys, per se. So redundancy in law enforcement is a very important thing. Laura mentioned a lot of things that I was going to cover, so we're going to slide through that, and I'm going to give you guys some of the case studies that I dealt with personally. So with that, human trafficking covers a very broad spectrum, anything from forced commercial sex acts to forced labor services. We're going to talk just briefly about that kind of thing, and we're going to talk more about case studies. We can move on. Florida ranks 3rd in the United States for human trafficking, only behind Texas and California. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the world, as Laura said, due to the fact that the commodity is reusable. This is just an illustration of that with the number of reported cases in each of the states, and another illustration that we've seen already. We have labor trafficking, sex trafficking, domestic minor sex trafficking, and domestic servitude, and then should be one more. And then trafficking versus smuggling is a common. There's a common misnomer about the two. So labor trafficking is modern-day slavery. It's approximately 20.9 people worldwide are victims of labor trafficking. It can be migrant workers in the agriculture industry, but also employed in hotels and restaurants throughout the U.S. and the world. An example might be somebody that's undocumented from South America or Central America who's employed in our county or the United States picking some type of fruit in order to pay a debt that he owes to the smugglers who got him. It's called debt bondage. Sex trafficking, an estimated 100,000 American children are trafficked for sexual exploitation each year. It alone consists of several forms. Adults and minors are victims of sex trafficking. A basic definition is that a trafficker has to use force, fraud, or coercion to procure an adult or minor into prostitution, which is commercial sex acts. That's just the definition. We can slide through that. Domestic minor sex trafficking. Domestic minor sex trafficking occurs in the United States with American-born juveniles. This is something that's unknown to many. Most examples of that are runaway juveniles that are some way get lured into performing commercial sex acts by a pimp or trafficker. The runaway juveniles are usually high risk, possibly in our group homes or other state-funded group homes. Not all victims of domestic minors are runaway or disadvantaged juveniles. Some victims come from stable homes who are swept off their feet by a boyfriend that persuades them into thinking that prostitution is the only way they can show their trafficker true love. In order for prostitution to be considered human trafficking, the trafficker must use force, fraud, or coercion to procure the person for a commercial sex act. However, when the victim is a juvenile, there is not legislative requirement for law enforcement to prove force, fraud, or coercion. So juveniles, as Laura said earlier, we don't have to prove that. And that's sometimes a very difficult thing to prove. Move on. So domestic servitude is a seemingly innocent form of human trafficking. As we talked about, it's possibly live-in nanny, maid, or some other form of household help. The point at which the victim's movements, pay, debt, and access to the outside world become restricted, the case becomes human trafficking. So trafficking versus smuggling. So victims of human trafficking need not be moved from one place to the other. There's no requirement for movement with human trafficking. The only thing that's required is exploitation or enslavement. Human smuggling, on the other hand, are when people are brought illegally from a different country into our country without us knowing about it, undocumented. You can skip that. So the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was enacted in 2000. It's arguably the most important law used to combat human trafficking. It's known for the use of 3 Ps: prosecution, protection, and prevention. That's President Bush signing it. As Laura said earlier, there was a bill enacted in 2012, House Bill 99, to decriminalize child prostitution. Juveniles can no longer be prosecuted for prostitution. In 2014, another bill was passed to create safe houses for victims of human trafficking. Prior to this, there were places around the state that were considered safe houses, but this bill required them to go through a certification process through DCF. 2014, this is the first case study. 2014, the Sheriff's Office received information from a woman that was scorned by her boyfriend, and she told me that her boyfriend, the child of her father, was forcing women into prostitution, forcing women to have sex for money, and giving them drugs to do that. So we began an investigation for several months that involved surveillance, internet searches, Facebook, Backpage, and we ended up finding out that at one point the victim went to do a commercial sex act in Port St. Lucie, and when she was there, the John tried to pay her with fake money. So the trafficker, she called the trafficker the pimp and told him what happened, and he was very upset, obviously. So he came barging into the house with a gun and ordered the victim to take whatever money he had and his computer and his car keys and leave. So now our victim, who was there to commit a commercial sex act, now is also a potentially principal in an armed robbery at a house in Port St. Lucie. So we had to work through some of that stuff in this case. And what I want to mention is that the victims in these things are not always the easiest individuals to talk to, specifically from law enforcement's perspective. They don't want to come right out and tell you that I'm a victim of human trafficking, and this is why. They either feel guarded because of their fear for getting in trouble themselves because they are committing a crime of prostitution if they're an adult, or they just don't have a very good opinion of law enforcement. Go to the next one. So we were able to successfully arrest and prosecute the case. Mr. Solomon was convicted of human trafficking, sent to prison. That was the first case of human trafficking that was arrested and prosecuted in Indian River County. Another case I want to talk to you guys about just real quick was one that still kind of bothers me to this day. It was a 17-year-old girl that was at the Knights Inn out west that I think it's still called the Knights Inn, the one behind IHOP. We got called out there because she had been beaten up pretty bad by an unknown male. When we got there, a friend of hers who came to her aid said that it was a black male named Will. That's the only information we had. The girl went to the hospital because of her injuries. Turns out she had a broken jaw and some other, I think she had a concussion as well. She was in the hospital for 3 days. Once she was released, my job started. I wanted to go talk to her because I wasn't allowed to talk to her while she was in the hospital. When I talked to her, or when she was released into DCF's custody because her mother had left her here and moved back to Massachusetts. So when I went to talk to her at the Hibiscus Children's Center, she told me an outlandish story about how her and her friend pulled up to a hotel room door, and some woman came out of the hotel room and just started beating her up indiscriminately for no reason. I didn't believe it, but I listened. So I told her, okay, well, that's really bad. Please, if you find out any more information, please let me know. I was going to go back in 2 days to talk to her. However, she ran away in the first 3 days of being at the Hibiscus house. So after she ran away, the sheriff's office and team of investigators tracked her, tried to find her. Took about 3 weeks. We got intel through our drug investigations unit that she was with this guy who the drug investigators knew was a drug dealer and sold narcotics. So with the help of them, our investigative team, we located the hotel room that we suspected them to be at. We had to sit on this hotel room for hours and hours to see if she was in there before we went in and kicked the door in. Eventually, we did see her leave and go back in. We executed a search warrant, and inside the room were 33-year-old male, the 17-year-old girl, and another adult woman who was known for prostitution. So after separating everybody and getting the 17-year-old back to the sheriff's office, I wanted to interview her. I had a victim advocate with me. I was ready to go. I wanted her to tell me all the bad stuff that's been happening to her, And the only thing that she would tell me was, I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him, over and over and over. And it was very clear to me that she had been conditioned, repeatedly conditioned, that that was going to be her response to me. She was not going to tell me anything else. She did tell me one other thing. She told me the drugs were hers. And so when we talk about trauma bonding and the victim mindset, it's so important for us as a society and our culture to understand that just because they have this really rough outer exterior and they want to be tough and they don't want to work with law enforcement, they don't want help from anybody, they really do down deep inside. They just have this shell, these layers of rough and toughness on the outside. So a very sad ending to that story is 2 years later, she ended up back on Backpage advertising herself for male companionship as a 19-year-old adult at that point. So very sad, but that's why we fight. That's why we keep moving forward and we keep having these things like this to create awareness and see what we can do to help solve the problem. There's a couple more. The hotline, that's another picture of the number if anybody needs it. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Now moving on, we're going to go to Jeff Hendricks from the State's Attorney's Office, 19th Judicial Circuit.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you again for inviting me and having me here. I think I have more value at the Q&A portion of all this because I can simply mirror what's been already said. I suppose I'll start by saying you could be very proud of the legislation and your legislatures up in Tallahassee. What they've done, if you watch that, track that human trafficking statute over the years, they've made it exceptionally overbroad and very generalized, making it easier for prosecutors to prove human trafficking, right, beyond a reasonable doubt, which, as we all know, is a very, very high burden. So that's the positive. But what's the negative? The negative is because they do that, legislation has been passed to make human trafficking easier to prove on us. They do that because legislators, realize that it gets very hard to prove the actual human trafficking beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very difficult charge to prove without cooperation of the victims, kind of like what Lori said and certainly Sergeant Partee referred to. We just simply don't get it as much as you would think. Now, certainly in proving a human trafficking case, I could bring in Sergeant Partee, call him an expert, and explain to you, as my jury, that he's been following this human trafficking organization for a year. He can tell you all about it. That might get you there. The way you prove these human trafficking cases against these organizations, against the true bad guys, is you probably need cooperators. And what does that mean? That means the victims, just like we were talking about not even 20 minutes ago. Very difficult, very difficult. Because they're afraid. They're just like the sergeant said, they are afraid of being prosecuted. They're afraid to come forward. Maybe there's some embarrassment there as well. Coercion. I can tell you about this in general. It's not going into case specific, but if you Google search it, you'll see that most of these massage parlors, just in general now, have where the girls live in the back, staying overnight. They have house rules posted on the wall, and 1, 2, or 3 of those house rules, the first, second, or third one is don't talk to the cops, don't cooperate, don't talk to anyone, that kind of stuff. So there's your coercion there in black and white. As well, you have in some of the Asian massage parlors that we're seeing, you've got a cultural background where these victims, and they are victims, they will not identify as such. They will not come forward and say, I'm a victim. It has to do with the shaming of the family. And again, 10 months ago, I didn't know much about that cultural portion of human trafficking, but it's there, it's present, and they being these true victims, really have trouble identifying as a true victim, whether it's the culture, the force that we just heard about, the coercion, the fear of law enforcement or being arrested or going to jail. And it becomes very difficult. And I think the illustration is, if you were my jury, right, you would probably want to hear from someone on the inside. Yes, I live in the back, and I have to pay rent weekly, and I don't get, and again, I'm talking in general, I don't get any money for a $50 half-hour massage. The house keeps all that. Ooh, I get an hour massage for $80. I get to keep 20 of that. And then if we go back and there's a sex act committed afterwards, I only get half of that. The house keeps the other half. Oh, but if it's a sex act, I'll use the term full-on sex, I get 80% of that. Now we're getting details, rather lurid details, but we're getting details, and that is you as a jury, right? You're my jury tonight. That's what helps to prove these cases beyond a reasonable doubt. It's almost like, I almost want to say the jury or the venire demands of the prosecution to hear from these girls. Actually, there's a way, I've done it before, where you can prove it through an expert coming in and saying, I'm the sergeant, and I've been watching this case for however long, and here's how it works. It just doesn't have the gravity to that, right? And I don't want to besmirch human trafficking, because there's a silver lining to all that. As we're developing, and Danny's probably going to talk about this for an hour, as we're developing these human trafficking cases against human trafficking organizations, what's the key word there? They're organizations, okay? So if we can think kind of in non-linear fashion when we're trying to take down human trafficking organizations beyond a reasonable doubt, you look at the organizations. And if they're committing crimes under the RICO statute, you have an excellent RICO case. RICO is a first-degree 30-year felony. Human trafficking is a first-degree 30-year felony. So you're going to see, even on that West Coast, I think Lori brought up the slide from Fort Myers, Naples area. They did a big human trafficking ring. You saw the RICO charges associated with them. And I think that's part of the way to deal with the dynamic of the human trafficking issues that come up. In other words, we have an organization here. Let's try and get a RICO. And a RICO, I don't want to say it's simple, but a RICO case is, do you have an organization? And we'll use the Asian massage parlor models to begin with. Well, yeah, of course we do. They're registered with sunbiz.org. They're a registered corporation. You got element 1. Element 2 of RICO is, are they doing more than 2 criminal acts outlined on this list in Florida Statute 895? And sure enough, Florida Statute 796, prostitution, etc., is on that list. So now you got element 2. Sometimes maybe you have that on video. And now you've got an excellent RICO case, or what I will argue to you is an excellent RICO case. So I say that to be, if you pick up the paper and read about human trafficking, certainly it is, especially what you're reading lately, odorous with human trafficking, but how that translates possibly over to a RICO case, now you understand it. And it's just kind of a dynamic of thinking, because sometimes we don't get, as was already said, we don't get 100% victim cooperation for any of those 4, 5, 6 reasons listed. And just because we don't get that doesn't mean we give up on the case. We just kind of think left and right and go and look at other statutes. And believe me, the legislation knows this, and so they're making statutes easier in this area, statutes easier to prove. And they're also making penalties for some of these human trafficking related crimes. They're making them higher penalties. There was a very low felony years ago called driving support from a house of prostitution, right? If you ran a house of prostitution and paid bills with the money you were making from it, that was a very low level 3rd-degree felony. Just not even a year and a half ago, they made it a 2nd-degree felony with a maximum of 15 years in prison. That's an excellent tool in what we're doing here. It's an excellent tool because most of these places, wherever, I'm not just talking about massage parlors, I'm talking about anything that the sergeant was talking about, you gotta pay the power bill. You gotta feed yourself, and that is loosely fitting into deriving some sort of support from a house of prostitution. And that's another example of how you can kind of think out of the box and really go after these kind of cases. I took some very brief notes. I just want to make sure I covered everything on my phone, but no, I think I actually I covered everything. I did make a note about minors. It's exceptionally easy to prove human trafficking with minors, as Lori said. It's very easy elements. That's why we rarely see it, because these human traffickers know, man, the second you put a minor in play, they're going to get maxed, right? And it's a very, very easy case, and we just don't see it in a localized manner. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, it certainly does, but they're really more the exception than the rule, because the human traffickers are smart enough to read the criminal statute before engaging in that business. So again, that's all I have. I didn't have a presentation. I think I'm really better poised to react to questions than to present. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff. Next, we're going to move on to Daniel Ruiz from the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Commissioner, for inviting Homeland Security Investigations to be present here tonight. I represent the federal agency that works the borders. Just a little background. I'm not native to Florida. I actually started my government career in law enforcement in 1994. It'll be 25 years now in May, but I've worked in New Jersey, Puerto Rico. I've covered some overseas locations in the Caribbean, to include Dominican Republic and Haiti. Also worked Jacksonville, Florida, Dallas, Texas, 2 tours in Washington, D.C., with oversight on some other things I'm going to talk about, and also worked in the Central Valley of California. That being said, if you can just back up a little bit, sir, first page. So Homeland Security Investigations was formed after 9/11, merging the customs and immigration laws. So what you see here is a photo of Super Bowl 50. That was in Santa Ana, California. And Homeland Security Investigations partners a lot with our state and locals and non-government organizations, especially when I was working in California. And so one of the human trafficking cases that I can speak to that has been already adjudicated out in California was a person from China who came to the United States on a B1, B2 visa, which basically means they're going to visit here for no more than 90 days with an extension of 90. However, that person was coerced into or brought into the kind of the prostitution business and was encountered during one of our campaigns out in California where the Department of Homeland Security runs the Blue campaign. We do that every January, kind of close to the Super Bowl. So we do a lot of outreach to hotels and so forth, airports. And one individual, a couple years later, we got a call from the state and locals asking for assistance because of an Asian female who was declothed, was actually strangled and killed and dumped in a dumpster. The state and locals could not identify her because she had no documents on her. She had no passport, no identities. So the way we were able to identify her was we actually had to run the fingerprints from the deceased victim. And in doing so, we were able to backtrack her entry into the United States. Then we were able to track that she was actually working out of, after she was encountered at the Super Bowl 50 as a prostitute, she later was then encountered at, or was later learned that she was working at an illicit massage business in California, in my area of responsibility. When I came to Florida, I kind of brought that human trafficking angle. I wanted to make sure that my agency was here fully engaged, not only with the state and locals, the non-government organizations, but also with Jeff, with the Assistant State Attorney's Office. I'm sorry, California has different terms. If you want to go to the next slide, sir. So basically what HSI does at the federal level is we can bridge a lot of gaps, not only in the United States, but overseas. But our main objective as a principal investigative agency under Homeland Security is to investigate the illegal movement of people and goods into and within the United States. One thing that's missing here is money. We also do a lot of money laundering, which is of course related to a lot of illicit activity. So basically we're looking at the transnational criminal threats to either investigate them, disrupt them, dismantle, and basically enforce any customs and immigration laws of the United States. So my agency basically touches any person, goods, or any type of monetary instruments that comes in or out of the United States. Next slide, please. So some of this slide actually covers a lot of things that was already covered here. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about my agency, and then I'll get into the human trafficking role. But our principal authorities lie within the following 7 icons here. We enforce over 400 laws: border security, homeland security, public safety, public health. All of those 4 kind of run into the illicit massage business that was recently discovered here in the Treasure Coast. Then we have the global trade, the U.S. economy, and the U.S. technology. A little bit about the global trade when I was in Washington, D.C. One of my subject areas was at the National Intellectual Property Rights section, where I focus on a lot of the trade. So when you have goods in the United States that come from China, sometimes they're made from prison labor goods. Some goods that actually come from maybe Africa or South America are actually made through child labor. So those are kind of the areas that I focused on when I was in Washington, D.C., but also relaying that information from our overseas components to our domestic offices here in the United States. Next slide. So HSI has 200 field offices in the United States, and then we also have 67 offices overseas. So basically what we can do with working with the state and locals in the state is we can bridge the gap sometimes between the United States and overseas country. For example, Brazil, Colombia, China, Russia, some parts of Africa, and as well as Europe. Next slide. So we're a leader in combating transnational criminal organizations that are involved in human trafficking. We take a cohesive global enforcement response in order to disrupt and dismantle these criminal organizations. So we have a twofold operation or initiative, and that's to proactively, and that's a key word, proactively identify, disrupt, and dismantle cross-border human trafficking organizations and minimize the risk they pose to national security and public safety. But what we also do is we employ a victim-centered approach. And as HSI, when state and locals or my agency or other federal agencies encounter victims or witnesses of human trafficking that may not be legally here in the United States, my agency, what we try to do is we try to get some immigration relief for those victims and witnesses, because I know there's been some misinformation out there as far as what my agency does, but anytime we have a victim that self-proclaims himself to be a victim, we try to find immigration relief as long as they're cooperating with law enforcement and as long as they're cooperating with the prosecution of the case. So we use that approach in order to kind of deter traffickers from conducting their activities. Next slide. So this is basically our strategy. There's the 4 Ps there. The prevent, that's actually doing like an outreach, like a forum in this setting. Protect, we protect the victims and witnesses. Prosecute, work with either the U.S. Attorney's Office or the State Attorney's Office. And we partner with non-government organizations, and we partner with the state and local government. One of the things that's missing here that I was part of in Central California was the 5th P, which I call proclamation. Every year, certain municipalities, counties would actually host an event for the public to kind of proclaim their fight against human trafficking. And a lot of jurisdictions do this, especially in California, on an annual basis. Next. So these are our stats for fiscal year 2018. These are the numbers that we report to U.S. Congress. So we opened 849 investigations. And when I mean opened, I'm not talking about this area. I'm talking about domestic and overseas. We've arrested 1,588 people during fiscal year 18, 538 convictions, and 308 victims assisted. If you notice on my table out there, I actually brought a one-page flyer of a recent case out of the Philippines where our HSI office in Manila was able to save 7 children that were involved in sex or human trafficking. So we work with our state and local partners in the Philippines in order to combat human trafficking. And sometimes that deals with certain U.S. citizens or non-U.S. citizens traveling to these specific areas in Asia to engage in child sex tourism, which is basically human trafficking. So here are our 4 pictures. Pictures speak a lot of words. So you have domestic servitude, you have agriculture, of course you have the massage, and then you have a restaurant. Next. So these are the different types of human trafficking. There's labor trafficking and there's sex trafficking. Any person under the age of 18 that's involved in commercial sex is straight sex trafficking. Once you get over the age of 18, then we have to deal with the force, fraud, or coercion elements to prove in the court. But regardless of what your immigration status is, anybody can be the trafficker, and anybody can be the victim. Next slide. So I know we already went over this, the trafficking versus smuggling. So like I said here, on the left, trafficking, it's for either foreign nationals or U.S. citizens. It can be anybody. Next slide. So here's kind of where the trafficking and the smuggling kind of come hand in hand. It's a lucrative business involving a lot of illicit activity, both from both the trafficking and smuggling side. And so we focus on organized criminal networks. Organized criminal networks, depending upon what geographic location you are in the United States, may come from different backgrounds. Next slide. So when does smuggling become trafficking? Well, smuggling becomes trafficking when you have one of those three elements: force, fraud, or coercion. And just to kind of backtrack, one of the things that DHS does in our fight against human trafficking is, and I'll speak a little bit about this, is one of the initiatives that we took last year is, I don't know if you heard on the news, but we had a 4 to 5%, or 400 to 500% worksite enforcement surge, where basically we go after employers who we suspect are employing unauthorized persons in the United States. Those locations may be landscaping companies, they may be restaurants, they may be events companies that handle events. They can also be illicit massage businesses. So during the recent operation, one of the things that the Department of Homeland Security did, and I did have some handouts on my table, is each employer in the United States is required to comply with this handbook. What the handbook spells out is that each employee under their business is supposed to have an I-9 form, which kind of has their information, their name, dates of birth, social security numbers. And lots of times what we find is that when we go to these companies, what we get in return are what we call suspect documents. And so when we get suspect documents, we actually call in the owner or we visit the owner and try to clarify some of the individuals that are under their business working for them. And we try to investigate to see if there's any type of identity and benefit fraud, or if there's human trafficking, or if the persons are actually not allowed to be employed in the United States. And to speak to illicit massage businesses, just to speak in general, lots of times what we find with illicit massage businesses is when we do serve these notices is that the same person is never there as far as the masseuse. These people are moved every 30 to 60 days, and these people are working 7 days a week. And when I mean 7 days a week, when we, in the past, when we had spoken to owners of these massage businesses, and the question was asked, what is your employee's schedule? Is it Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or 11, depending on, are they working 8 hours? Basically what they're doing is they're working a full day from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. or 10 p.m., and they're working 7 days a week. And they're allowed to take, quote unquote, a vacation every 2 to 3 weeks. So what's happening is when they go on vacation, they're actually going to another massage parlor, either in California, Texas, New York, or maybe some other part of Florida. Next slide. So anybody can be a victim, anybody can be a trafficker, regardless of gender. One of the stories from California that I can share during one of these proclamations with the city of Fresno and with the county of Fresno was an individual that worked at a food truck. So he was of Indian descent. His family came over from India. His uncle was a high-ranking member of the Indian Air Force. And so what Mr. Hendricks was talking about before is the culture. You have to sometimes understand the culture. So when in India, when someone of authority kind of tells you to do something within the family network, you kind of do it. So what happened to this one male individual who was a U.S. citizen, he found himself working 7 days a week at a food truck. He was then working all day, and then when he would get home at night, when he was sleeping in the bed, he would be beaten, he would be intimidated, and he would literally be just abused, both physically and emotionally. And so it took one day for him to kind of realize that he was a victim and that he reached out to an NGO, and the NGO was able to kind of get law enforcement involved. And then long story short, the success story from this story is that he went through the victim witness programs through the NGOs. He is here, I believe he got his college degree already, and now he's trying to get his law degree because what he wants to do is be a prosecutor for either the state of California or for the U.S. Attorney's Office in order to tackle human trafficking. So those are one of the success stories of a U.S. citizen here in the United States. And like I said, everybody has said traffickers use all various forms of force, fraud, and coercion. Next. We already already covered this. The last one, or actually the third one, actually, let me go to the second and third one. So one of the cases we worked in Fresno was actually, there was about 20 to 30 organized gangs in Fresno, California. So we dealt with all different types of gangs from different types of backgrounds. But what we did find was one specific gang would tattoo their gang name on the person's, they would put their tag or their name on the person and basically traffic them through social media, Facebook, through those. So those are one of the things that one may want to watch out for is people being advertised for sale on social media. And associated with relatives, family, friends, gangs, transnational criminal organizations. We had a child exploitation case here in Florida where the biological dad was live streaming, and I'm sorry if this is sensitive information, was live streaming the abuse of his 2- and 4-year-old biological children. So what happens in those investigations is they're being streamed through social media. So the kids are basically being exploited that way. So that's where kind of the alone or in groups kind of plays in. So you may have one person kind of exploiting his children or children, or you may have gangs exploiting people, or you may have criminal organizations from either Asia, Europe, South America, and other countries. Next slide. So these are the indicators. Just because these indicators exist doesn't mean it's necessarily human trafficking. But one of the things that are related to illicit massage businesses or other occupations is they're paid very little. They're allowed little rest. They're usually coerced. They are usually threatened at the immigration authorities. If there are foreign nationals, will be called. And by doing so, these people are less likely to come forward and become victim, to proclaim that they're victims. But definitely the physical health, lack of control, and abnormal behavior, these are kind of all signs of human trafficking. Next slide. So the abnormal behavior, there's a list there. A lot of forced alcohol or drugs, definitely with minors. From what I saw in California, the abuses, victim emotionally, physically, and sexually, definitely one of the key. And then they're isolated from their friends and or family. Next slide. So this is the DHS Blue campaign. We basically run this every January, but this year, due to the government shutdown, we didn't do a lot of outreach, but so I'm glad, Commissioner, that you held this forum because it allows the Department of Homeland Security to kind of educate the public as what does Department of Homeland Security, how we combat human trafficking, how Homeland Security Investigations, the investigative arm of DHS, combats trafficking. And so the next slide has a lot of the same information for the tips with the ICE tip line, the National Human Trafficking tip, and the DHS. I'm just going over my notes here, make sure I didn't miss anything. So yeah, so basically, Homeland Security, we partner with state and local agencies, and working in different jurisdictions. Each states have different human trafficking laws as well as different municipalities. And I can say that it's a breath of fresh air here in Florida, that a lot of the human trafficking laws that the U.S. federal government has kind of parallel the state laws, and that allows a lot of flexibility into kind of attacking this issue here in the state of Florida. Thank you, Commissioner.
Great, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to our last presenter, Jamie Bond, Place of Hope, on actionable steps against human trafficking.
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Jamie Bond, and I am with Place of Hope, and I will echo everyone up here in thanking Commissioner Zorc for putting this together. We really do appreciate it. Place of Hope recently honored Commissioner Zorc as our 3rd annual Hero of Hope, and I think today is really a testament in showing why that is. I know he's humble, and he probably doesn't want me to share that, but we're extremely thankful. So who is Place of Hope? I've had the pleasure of speaking with many of you in the audience, but for those of you who I have not, vertically challenged, I gotta get closer. For those of you I have not had the pleasure of speaking with, so Place of Hope is a local foster care organization. You can leave that slide up there, that's fine, has some information for them. It's up to you. So we are a local foster care organization. We care for children who have been abused, neglected, and trafficked all the way from North Broward to Indian River County. And our primary function in the circuit is to care for children who have been removed from their homes, place them in stable and loving environments, find foster families in the community, license them, provide wraparound services and case management for them. We started in Palm Beach County, and then we grew up here to the Treasure Coast. We care for children who have also, or young adults, who have aged out of the foster care system from 18 to 24, and identified that there are homeless or community youth that also deserve that opportunity to live in a transitional housing opportunity and giving them a chance at life. Through all of our programs, we identified, for over the 17 years, we've been entrenched in human trafficking. So we've identified children from all ages, as young as 10 years old, all the way up to 25 years old, who have been victims of trafficking. So for us, we have been recovering and involved in restoration of these victims for many, many years. But last year, it was very important for us to launch and get on the front side of what's going on with human trafficking and provide our human trafficking education prevention outreach program, which is the first part of the HG 101 that you heard Laura. So really today, I wanted to talk to you about some actionable steps. And the first thing really is to become educated. So by a show of hands, who in this room has learned something today? Well, there you go. Commissioner Zorc, you should be very happy. Everyone has learned something today. Yes, I learned something every day. I had a meeting with Lieutenant Foley, Laura, and actually had a meeting with Lieutenant Foley yesterday down in Palm Beach County, and we learned something from him. I mean, every conversation, there's always something else to learn. But be educated. So today, just by being here, you've taken that first step, so you should be proud of yourselves. And I think it was Major Flowers who said, I hope today is not where it stops. So continuing to educate yourself. My background is not social services. My background is actually advertising, marketing, and hotel, restaurant, resort management. So if I can follow my passion and educate myself and learn about human trafficking and do something, I'm a prime example. I'm just like every one of you in this room. I'm not nearly as decorated as anybody else on this panel, but I am a person that's just like you that said this is not going to happen in my community and I'm going to do something about it. So it took me educating myself and learning about that. So really we hope today we've been able to provide you with some of that information. So actionable steps, as I mentioned, number one, be educated. Number two, red flag cards. So you see up on the screen, this is something, as Commissioner Zorc mentioned, there are clipboards at each one of these podiums. Please take a moment and put your email address on there or your physical mailing address, and we will provide you any of this literature that you can have. There is a detachable card. On the bottom, you can see where it says red flags. If you flip to the other one, and this is something that you can detach and keep in your wallet. We have these medical cards we have these cards for medical staff. We go out and we educate NPs and different people that you think would be more trauma informed. They can keep these in their badge. This is information that you can have if you just have a question. It has the hotline on it that you've seen many times today. So it's there for you. You don't have to be an expert to be able to do something and make a difference. So having those cards on you is important. Place of Hope is working on a documentary. It'll be released in the next couple of weeks. I'm not gonna show you the trailer today in essence of time, but this documentary will kind of be an abridged version of what Laura gave us today, and it gives us an opportunity to reach communities where we can't physically go. So we cover 6 counties, and if you can imagine all of the educational series, I think this is probably the 4th or 5th time Laura's spoken today. So this invisible trailer, this invisible documentary really allows us to get into communities and educate your friends. So whether it's in your youth groups, your Bible studies, your civic groups, whatever that looks like for you, your business. Maybe you have family that live in New York or Ohio and we can't get there, but this information can still get out to them. We would love this information to go viral. The more education the community has, the better. There's that old adage, see something, say something, but if you don't know what you're seeing, you can't say something. So making sure that you're educating yourself. Invite us in to wherever you live. Allow us to come in and speak. We've spoken with FPL. We go into NCCI, again, many hospitals, and we go and we present and educate people on what this looks like, and we can tailor those. Invite us in to host one of these in your groups. Connect us to groups. So Laura mentioned earlier she works with some girls that's on a lockdown facility, and she runs 2 different kind of groups. One's My Life, My Choice, and that's for 12 to 18-year-old girls who have been possibly trafficked or exploited in some capacity. It is a 8 to 10 week program, and it is a great opportunity for us to help these young girls identify if they have been victims of trafficking. There are girls that have come forward and said, oh my gosh, this is really happening to me. One of the survivors that we interviewed for this documentary was entered into trafficking, and this will touch on some of what Daniel said. One of the survivors that we interviewed, her mom took her to a drug deal, and the drug dealer asked her, okay, for your drugs, how much for your daughter? And that's how she was entered into trafficking. And it wasn't until she was 24 years old when she was she was able to get out, and now she speaks out.
For the price of $10.
For $10, right? It just makes your skin crawl. It makes me, and I've heard these stories and I've seen these videos time and time again, but it still disgusts me, and it really happens, and we have the ability to do something about that. So the My Life, My Choice program helps these kids identify what's going on in their life. It may not have been trafficking, it may have been exploitation, it may have been abuse, but she says, I never knew what a normal childhood looked like. I asked to stay home in detention, or I asked to stay in detention and not go home every day, and no one thought that was strange. No one stopped to ask me, why don't you want to go home? So we partner with the Boys and Girls Club. We partner with people that are on the front lines of these kids and educating them, and then also educating these kids to come forward and speak. This is not what a normal childhood looks like. So we need to be able to educate them as well. And I empathize is for boys and girls, 12 to 18 years old. You won't hear the words like pimp recruitment. It'll be more about bullying and empathy. And Laura will tell you, after speaking and working these groups with these girls, empathy is something that our younger generation, seems to lack. Being proactive with your kids. So out on our table, we have a table out front, and there's a lot of material out there. Please take all of it. It is for you. I would love for all of that to be taken. These are some apps. We were meeting with Lieutenant Foley yesterday, and we were just talking about some cybercrime and just different apps that are out there, and there's so much going on, and technology is just we're behind the times and trying to catch up, but there's some cards and some apps. Be proactive with your kids. Communicate with them. Let them know that if somebody sends you something, a sextortion text, if they're sending you something, it's okay to come to you and say, I got this. I don't know what to do with it. Because if they feel fearful that you're gonna take away their technology, they're not gonna tell you. And that's a very good way for them to get lured and pulled into it. Join the coalition. I know that Sergeant Ross Partee was a part of the coalition. He still is. He actually was chairman first year?
I was chairman of law enforcement.
Okay. So I am the vice chair of the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Treasure Coast in Okeechobee, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier. We need more people engaged in the coalition, and this is a prime example of what the coalition is. It's government agencies, non-government agencies, it's philanthropists, it's people in the community that care and that invest in their community and want to do something. So there are forms for you to sign up out front. We meet quarterly. There's no cost to it. We do have speakers. In April, Laura actually will be presenting. The following quarter will be Representative Toby Overdorf, and he'll be talking about his House bill, which is currently in session right now, House Bill 291. We need you. We need more people. We have a Train the Trainer, which is next Wednesday, March 20th. That's going to be held at the Guardian ad litem office in St. Lucie County, right by the First Data Field Stadium. It's from 12 to 3. Again, there's no cost to that. Train the Trainer, it really is your 101, how you can even take what you learned here and dive in even more in depth. So please, we encourage you to come out. You don't have to RSVP, but if you would like to, I would love to start that conversation with you. My cards are out there. Join us. Place of Hope is hosting their second annual State of the State, and Commissioner Zorc was a part of it last year. Representative Erin Grawl last year was our keynote speaker. She will be back again this year, and Major Flowers has also agreed to come and speak, and really the purpose of this really originally was going to be a post-session wrap-up and really what's going on in session and how it affects Indian River County residents and businesses. But with, I think, just the timeliness of what's going on and with all the Senate bills and House bills that are in play right now, it's going to be a hot topic. So once session wraps up, we want to hear what the government has to say and what we're going to be doing about the Johns and whether we're able to increase their punishment, what all of those kind of things look like. So being a part of these kind of events help us raise awareness. It also helps us raise funds. So we are a nonprofit organization. So for you to be able to come and partner with us, it takes money. It's the elephant in the room, but it does take money for us to do what we do. So if you have the capacity to give your time, wonderful. If you have the capacity to give your money, wonderful. We need everyone on board. And helping us find safe foster homes, I think the biggest problem, well, I won't say the biggest problem. One of the problems is that for these victims, there's really no place for them to go. There's not a lot of service providers. Catholic Charities offer service, but that's primarily in Palm Beach County. They will come up here. We do serve victims of domestic minor trafficking, both sex and labor, but we're very limited on resources. If we don't have a home for them to go, all the kids that are in our care come to us through DCF because they've had to be removed because of a call. If we don't have a home for them to go, they're going out of circuit. They're going out of county. They're going in places that's away from where they need to be. So any of the support that you give, no matter how you give it, your time, advocating. I know there's several faces in the room, people that are on our Leadership Advisory Council. The United Way of Indian River County stepped up and gave us a free office space for 2 years, which is huge for a nonprofit. Although we've been in existence in Palm Beach County for 20 years, we've only been up here for 4 years. And so that keeps our overhead extremely low. So every dollar that comes in, every volunteer hour, everything that happens goes directly to these kids and these programs. So we really need safe foster homes. We need more resources. Bottom line is we need you. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any of those. I do cover all 4 counties as the development director for Place of Hope.
Great, thank you. And some closing housekeeping items. I know we've got some students here from the Charter High School. I'm going to have my wife raise her hand. She can sign your attendance forms for tonight. Also, I was given a copy of the proclamation, which we will move forward next year during that appropriate time. So thanks for the wording for that. That's great to have. For the question and answer side, since this whole session is being taped and broadcast, if you do have a question, it would be much better if you could ask it at the podium. That way it can be picked up on the microphone and then everybody can hear the question, and then whoever is the appropriate person to answer, we can do it that way. I know the presenters are also going to be hanging around for a little bit. If you'd rather do it as a one-on-one question, not something that you want to have kind of broadcast around, we can do it that way. They have information in the lobby. My cards are in the lobby for questions. One thing that I would like to also stress is that we need to get the smaller version of this program out into more places in the community through the workplace. So if you see something, you have to know what you're looking at. I wouldn't have known 6 months ago what to look for either, so I'm still kind of learning that process. So if someone would like to ask any particular question in a more of a public setting, please feel free to do so. If not, we can kind of reconvene from here out to the lobby, and then we can do one-on-ones. It's up to you. It's your program for tonight. So I'll take any direction or any questions that anybody may have. We have a couple on this side, so come on up, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this tonight. I'm an educator in high school, and I appreciate that. I would like to ask, is there any program where there could be witness protection for the victims? Because I think that would enable them to be more able to be a testimony and to share and protect them better.
Speaking for the U.S. federal government for the Department of Homeland Security, the Witness Protection Program is operated by the United States Marshal Service. So if we have a criminal investigation and we find that there's a victim or witness, and it depends on their level of involvement with either the trafficker or with let's say the criminal organization that's involved in human trafficking, the individual is required sometimes to testify, and as a result of that, sometimes they may receive some threats. And so there is a witness protection program under the United States Marshal Service that the person can elect to participate in. But also what I want to add to that is sometimes these victim witnesses, they fall in different lanes. So sometimes they may be a victim, or sometimes the witness may be a part of the criminal organization. And sometimes what I've seen in my career is that they cycle out of the witness protection program and they find themselves back into the criminal syndicate. So speaking from the victim side, there is, of course, protection for the witness, but then we also have the other witnesses that sometimes are part of the criminal syndicate. So it just depends on what lane they're navigating in, and the level of protection that's provided to them.
Great, there was another hand I saw come up on this side. Come on up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and first compliments to you, Commissioner, for doing this, and thanks all of you people. This is very informative and very useful to me. I have sort of a 2 or 3 part question. Sergeant Partee, I believe, had a slide that said children, and I assume that means minors, are no longer prosecuted for prostitution. And if I heard that right, what is it? And second, if the person involved in this, and this may go to you, officer, if it's a minor, is it automatically trafficking? And Mr. State's attorney, if it's automatically trafficking, I think I heard you say it's a degree 1 felony. And with regard to RICO, can you establish a RICO case if there is only one knowing participant in it, but the services are being facilitated by a second party unknowing? Does that qualify? Could that qualify as a RICO case? And thank you very much.
It could. There's a part of RICO. It could be a sole proprietorship, but in general, RICO needs to be 3 people. And it needs to be at least 2 criminal acts. Normally, the number of criminal acts isn't a problem in the human trafficking cases, but yeah, you could do it with a sole proprietorship, but it's very rare, and it wouldn't really make for a strong case, because if you have a sole proprietorship, who do you have testifying on the team against the bad guy? Remember, I said it's the best way to put forth those cases is to have somebody cooperate, and so it wouldn't be a strong case, but it's doable under the law, yes, sir.
With respect to the child prostitution, it was House Bill 99. It was passed, I believe, in 2012. And it just decriminalizes prostitution for juveniles that are engaged in commercial sex acts. Somebody under the age of 18.
I'm going to piggyback on a RICO question I had wrote down. Is RICO a federal law, or is it also a state law? So who does the prosecution on
It started as a federal law,
Okay.
certainly, and Florida simply just mirrored its statute and said it's the same. The Florida statute is pretty much identical to the federal statute, but its
Okay.
inception was federal.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I think I saw a hand maybe up on the right side of the room. Yes, come on up, please.
Looks like you took a lot of notes.
Hi. In states where prostitution is legal, is sex trafficking still a problem? Like, do you find that people are still trafficked?
That's off my radar. I don't know. Maybe Danny can help. That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay, so working in multiple states, do you know marijuana is legal in some states? So the federal law does not recognize the legality of marijuana in these states. So the same with sex trafficking. So if the minor, if the person is under the age of 18, regardless if they're willing, it's still a sex trafficking act, especially if they're transported from those states to another state. So if they're being moved from Nevada, for example, to Florida for the purpose of being involved in the commercial sex act, that's a violation of federal law.
And if I might add just one thing to that, the thing to keep in mind, the important thing to keep in mind with sex trafficking is the exploitation side of it. They're not willing participants, and as the special agent just said, the juveniles don't even have the ability to say they're willing. They cannot consent.
Are people ever found that they are exploited or forced in states where it is legal, or do the people in those states that are prostitutes, do they tend to just be people who are willing in the first place? They don't need to force anybody to do it.
Repeat the second half of the question again.
So in a state where prostitution is legal, do you find that most, if not all of them, are willing, or are there still some people who are unwilling, but then still within those states?
I can't speak to that. I don't know if the agent can.
I haven't worked in those states. Is it possible that someone, let's say for example, just hypothetically speaking, arrives from a foreign country, comes into California, and then is transported to one of those states and then engaged in the activity? It kind of falls within human trafficking at the federal level, that they're being coerced, forced. So from the federal level, yes, we can go after those type of cases.
And can I just share something that it kind of doesn't totally answer the question, but just with one of the programs that we run, we work with women who've worked in prostitution that are on the streets down in Palm Beach County. And, they're long-term been in this situation for 20, 30 years. And so on the outside, they look like a drug-addicted, fully consenting prostitute. Sergeant Partee had a slide that talked about how even adults, who are addicted can still be manipulated and kind of coerced into this. And when you talk to our law enforcement partners that we work with for this outreach, you'll find that many of these women who are 30, 40 years old that appear to be consenting, appear to be in this because they want their drugs, they got started when they were 11 years old and 14 years old. And so, the world kind of sees them as this prostitute, but they got started as victims that just happened to turn 18 before we could identify them as victims, help them provide services. And now they've been stuck in this situation because of their drug addiction, but their dealer is also their boyfriend and is their pimp. And, while it appears that of course, what they're doing is illegal, and it looks like they want to be doing it, they're still experiencing some of that force and fraud and coercion, and the whole reason why it still remains not recognized necessarily as a trafficking case is because they're not willing to cooperate, they're not willing to turn on their dealer because he's supplying this addiction. If you've been addicted for 20 or 30 years, it is asking a lot to have you stop that and say, all right, let me turn on this guy. And so it doesn't quite answer your question, but I just wanted to kind of bring that story up to show that even on the surface, and I'm just guessing, I don't know about the states where it's legal, but even on the surface, if it appears that maybe they are willingly being involved, the reality is that no little girl grows up and wants to work in a strip club for the rest of their life. No little girl wants to grow up and be on the streets, and maybe this is how they get their money, this is how they get their drugs, but it's a hard life and it's hard work, and you oftentimes get way more than you signed up for. And so we always try to, from a services perspective, try to think about the fact that even if they say they want to do this today, we don't know the reasons or the fear, whatever's making them say that, but we still believe in working to, working with the idea that there's something going on behind the scenes that's influencing that. And, if there's one person out there being trafficked, there's 20 people, we still have an issue, and whatever hardships are leading them down that line, we are willing to help and provide them alternatives to what they're living. Just a side note.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions during this session? If not, we will finish up the program. And I want to give a thanks. Oh, yes, we have a question. While she's coming up, Ed Offit in my office was very instrumental helping put all the parts and pieces of this together today, but he finished up a little bit early today, so I just want to give a public thanks to him for the great job he did in helping put everything together today. Yes?
Hey, so I know a lot of you voiced frustration that some of the victims don't cooperate with law enforcement at first. Has there been any sort of effort in Florida, locally or nationally, to maybe stop charging some of these women with crimes at first? Or is that a part of the discussion or not? Whoever wants to address it.
I'll answer from the federal level and work in the state of California. So California passed some laws basically not going after the persons as prostitutes and then focusing as victims. And that's what Homeland Security Investigations does. When we find a business, let's say, for example, illicit massage business, we believe that the employees there, the masseuses, we're going to treat them first as victims. It's a victim-centered approach. And then kind of work the chain up to the criminal organization. But it depends on the state, though, on state-by-state laws. But I can speak for when I was in California that, yes, they stopped charging a lot of these females or males for prostitution. It's still, the law was passed, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago. I do think it is helpful. However, what I did see was a lot of the victim and witnesses that identified themselves as such went back to their pimp or went back to the same line of work, and they found themselves doing that 2 or 3 times.
If I can add to that, I think it's the, from a service side, from a services approach, it is something that it should be strived to do, is to keep the victims victims and not charge them. However, from an investigation standpoint, sometimes it helps get them out. It's their first push out of the life that they're in, and then we always rely on our service and our victims advocates to help keep them out. But as Special Agent Ruiz just said, a lot of times, unfortunately, due to their conditioning and their trauma bonds, they end up back right where we recovered them from.
Or worse, they leave. That's the blunt answer to your question is if they don't get charged, they can rely on non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Kind of going back to the question that you had, ma'am, the educator sitting to your right, they can leave whenever they want. If they're not charged, or that they do indeed leave. And a prosecution on a typical human trafficking case would take 2 years to go to trial, and they won't be around in 2 years, and then I have to drop the case, which is not something we want to do. But that's I guess it's a sad truth. They will leave, and they indeed do leave, never to be found.
And just to keep going on that same point, it's from an investigator and a state attorney's point of view, if we have to drop the case because we lose our cooperation, then the bad guy is set free, and he's out there re-victimizing either the same person or more people. So it's a real juggling act to make these cases work and prosecute them to the end.
What I'd like to do is if any of you would like to make just a closing statement or any tidbit that maybe didn't get mentioned earlier, we'll just start down here on the right with Ross and come this way. If there's anything else you'd like to add or a closing comment?
I'd just like to say thank you guys for coming out and learning, taking the initiative to learn more about human trafficking and the problems that we face. We do have a long way to go, but as you see, we have dedicated people on that mission. So I just want to tell you guys thank you for coming out.
And I will echo that comment. I think I covered pretty much everything that I needed to cover, but it takes a village. It really does. And like I said earlier, today is step 1 for so many of you, and hopefully it's not your last step. So thank you very much for coming out and listening.
Again, what Jamie said previously about, it really comes down to you and all of us working together. And so keep me busy. My job is to come and bring the education to your groups, bring groups, bring this group programs we have for youth that have been trafficked or even who have not been trafficked, just need to learn about it. So I would love to connect with any of you that have places you can bring us in to bring this education to your staff, to your communities, and then also bring these groups into schools or places where other agencies you're connected to that are serving kids. So please grab my card afterwards. Be happy to talk with you.
I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. This is a very sensitive subject, human trafficking, not only here in Florida, but also across the United States and around the world. So thank you for listening to allowing my agency to represent our footprint here in the Treasure Coast and how we're combating human trafficking and how you guys are actually part of the team where you can actually provide tips or information to Homeland Security or to the hotlines in order for us to work with the state and local agencies, attorney's office, and then as well as the NGOs.
Just thank you for your time. Thanks for your smart questions, actually. Thank you.
Very good. And thank you. Again, there's clipboards if you'd like to be put on where you would receive updated information from Place of Hope and their outreach through your place of work, through your place of worship, any place that they can get in front of a group of folks so they can learn more about if you hear something, say something. Again, thank you guys very much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it.